The City of Tempe's work study session here at the Tempe History Museum for December 5th, 2019. Happy holidays. First item on our agenda is our call to the audience. I do not have any cards. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address us on any of the items listed on the agenda? Could you please get my attention? Seeing none. Close that portion. First item on the issue review session, we're going to actually move item A and B. We're going to take B first because we're waiting on an individual for item A. We're going to take the 5-year consolidated plan for community development block grants and home programs. Paul and Levon, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Paul Bentley. I'm the Deputy Human Services Director here for the City of Tempe. And with us is Levon Lamy, our Housing Services Manager. On an annual basis, we come forward to you and present an annual or proposed annual allocation for community development block grant and home dollars for you to review and provide feedback on as part of our annual plan for these dollars. What's different this year is that we are at the end of a 5-year consolidated plan, meaning that it is expected that organizations that receive federal dollars as entitlement communities also prepare a 5-year plan to guide the planning process for those dollars. So at the end of this current fiscal year, we are in need of having a new consolidated plan. So Levon and his team over this past year, actually starting in May of 2019, have gone out and provided opportunities for outreach to our community to provide input as to what they feel the needs are for our community when it comes to these dollars. Through that research and the methodology, I wanted to speak a little bit about that in a moment, but through that research we are going to present to you what those findings are for you to have input on, and then also present to you a proposed annual allocation of CDBG and home or community development block grant dollars and home dollars for the next year. So a little bit about the community assessment and the methodology that has been followed. Levon and his team have been very creative in making sure that there has been a targeted approach to ensure that individuals who are currently within our programs or eligible for our programs are having an opportunity to provide input in a very targeted manner. Specifically, while everyone has the opportunity to provide input, Levon and his team have scheduled 5 specific outreach meetings, 3 of those at our schools, 1 of those at Escalante Center, and 1 at Gracie's Village, to include, again, individuals who are in our programs or those who are eligible. And so at this point in time, we have had about 953 respondents. And his approach is working, and their approach is working. For that 953, approximately 800 of those respondents are within either of those 2 categories. In addition to that, as you'll notice in this picture, there was some specific incentives provided to help individuals come and participate. And so specifically, that's a Kona ice truck that you'll see there. And so in order to gather information, it was thought by his team that it might not be a bad idea to provide an opportunity for the families and the children to get some ice cream while they were filling out the surveys. So that occurred. In addition to that, we need to also be very careful and also open to the fact that there's 2 more opportunities still available. Within December of this year and January of next year, there will be 2 additional meetings at the Vial Center providing input as well. And should that input significantly or substantively change the results that we received, that information will be presented and posted to you as far as the allocation and what we're intending to do. Okay, next slide, please. From a historical perspective, as mentioned, as an entitlement community, there are federal regulations that are guiding us in our processes. One of those is 24 CFR Part 91, which requires a 5-year consolidated strategic plan. And again, this work group is currently in the process of creating that 5-year consolidated plan, which presents the specific areas in which the community is asking these dollars to be focused. And Levon will be presenting that information here in just a few minutes. In addition to that, as we have done in the past, there is the annual action plan. And the annual action plan is following that 5-year consolidated plan, but on an annual perspective, in which what are those annual allocations what is it that we feel is the best way to utilize those dollars, again, for community development block grant and home processes. Next slide, please. In this process, we also want to emphasize how this fits within the city's and council's strategic priorities. Specifically, these efforts are focused on performance measure 4.09, which is achieving a housing inventory ratio for affordable, workforce, and market rate housing categories that meets the recommendations made for a 3-person household in the most recent study, which is a current performance measure within our strategic management process, which fits within the quality of life priority. In addition, we believe that these efforts also support the sustainable growth and development priority as well. Now, with that background, Levon is going to present the specific details of the outreach as well as the proposed allocation of dollars.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Levon Lamy, Manager for Housing Services for the City of Tempe. On the slide we have up right now, just as a refresher, because our plan is 5 years old, these are the 19 identified priority needs from the current consolidated plan that we are working with. I intentionally highlighted the housing assistance, down payment assistance, homeless prevention priorities, because when you look at this consolidated or this needs assessment as it relates to the priority needs from the prior needs assessment, you know, we've gone from 19 identified priority needs down to an overarching 4, but there are repeats, and this has gotten to be much more focused. The initial priority needs that are showing right now are affordable rental housing, affordable home ownership options, homeless services, and public service needs. When you read into the information on the public service needs, those do relate back to the rental housing, homeless services, and affordable home ownership options. So, based on the responses we've received so far, we did prepare a proposed initial budget for the 2021 annual action plan. So for one, we are looking to take 20% of the program administrative cap, which allows us to do salaries, paper, pencils, and cover the administrative costs of the program. For the public service activities, this is a cap. We are proposing $191,000, which would be the cap for public services to go in. Now, when it comes to public services, historically, we have been using public services in 2 ways. The first way we've used public service is to help support the HOPE outreach team with basic necessities and needs for individuals they're working with who happen to be homeless, whether that's securing documents, bus tickets home, MREs, blankets, some of those needs. Additionally, around $80,000 of those funds had been put into the TCC agency review process to be allocated out for homeless service providers. In September of 2019, HUD did provide a rule change and clarification, allowing us to use CDBG funds for transitional housing, specifically targeted for homeless individuals or individuals and families who had been impacted by the opioid epidemic. We are recommending that instead of putting those funds out for allocation through the agency review process, that we retain those to make a more unified process from not only the active engagement with the HOPE team, but supporting the development of transitional housing and the supportive services needed to fill that gap in housing as we move these folks into more permanent housing or permanent supportive housing. Moving into emergency repairs. The emergency repair program is a program targeted for income eligible homeowners. It does have a cap, it is a grant, and it has a cap of $15,000. This program is where, as you see on the pictures, we replace air conditioners, heaters, water heaters, do roof repairs, ADA improvements, the goal being to keep folks in the houses that they're already in. That program does have a waiting list of around 25 people right now. However, some of those have already been served because we do preference this program. In the summer, we replace air conditioners first and come back and do other work second. This time of year, we're replacing water heaters and heaters first, and then we would come back if you have a roof leak or need some other type of work done. So that would be $378,000. For acquisition, we would be recommending to put an additional $766,000 into the acquisition or redevelopment of affordable housing, Over the last couple of years, that is the funding that we have been using to purchase units that are then used for permanently affordable rental housing. At this time, we have 28 units that are permanently affordable rental housing, so we would be asking to put an additional allocation in there so we can buy more units. This budget was based on flat funding. Our funding we received from HUD last year was $1.6 million. We're anticipating $1.6 million this year. However, if there were any changes to this, we would adjust this budget accordingly to match the new funding. One thing that is always important to note is these budgets are heavily dependent upon the census. So we are looking forward to the new census in April to see if that helps with our formula funding a little bit. I would also like to note that of the $1.6 million that we received in last fiscal year, we used all but $155,000. So we are using the funding in the year it's been received. There's very little carryover. The carryover that we do have is going towards acquisition of permanently affordable rental housing.
Just 1 second.
How much is that?
$155,000.
And then one other thing that you may have noticed when looking at your packet is in prior years within the public service dollars, the Homeless Solutions Coordinator position was funded directly out of the public service. Recently, through the process of reviewing the budgets, that position still exists and it still is being funded through CDBG, but through the administrative dollars instead. What that means is that these public service dollars that are still focused for homeless solutions are now providing more direct services rather than funding the position.
And additionally, in last year, we had allocated funding for the workforce development position that we're cooperating with the county on. That funding is secured for another year, so this is just this year's allocation. The funding for the for workforce and the homeless services coordinator is still there. So when we move into the home program, we are looking at $29,000 or the 5% cap for program administration. Again, it helps us to offset salaries, paper, pencils, just administrative costs. For the down payment assistance program, we would be recommending putting $70,000 into that program again. Now that is a reduction from prior year funding. Last year we put $155,000 into that category. To date, we have not been able to utilize any of that $155,000. Families just have not been able to find units that meet the price point and meet the cap on our assistance. But we are recommending allocating more funds because we do know the micro estates project is coming online. That's geared towards income eligible households. Habitat has some projects coming online in the next year that are geared as affordable and workforce housing for home ownership options. So we feel fairly confident that we would be able to utilize those funds in the upcoming year. Yes.
Vice Mayor?
New system. Hello, testing. I have a question about the down payment assistance funds. Is it possible to work, say, with Newtown Community Development, Community Land Trust, the CLT, and they provide down payment assistance, but they're for permanently affordable homes, so they're more readily accessible to folks. Is it possible to have, I mean, it would have to be a formalized partnership, but is it possible to disperse funds in that way through some kind of cooperative agreement? Because they have a down payment assistance block of funds, and they get it out there because the homes are permanently affordable, and they're not, you mentioned that it's hard for us to use our funds because there aren't that many homes that are affordable out in the market. But
really, if I may, really the cap is what is the concern for us with this program.
mm-hmm.
And while we already do partner with Newtown and many programs, when it comes to these specific dollars, it's the cost of the home that is determining whether or not these dollars can be used for down payment assistance.
Right.
And so maybe I'm misunderstanding the question then.
So one of the reasons we can't disperse the funds, and they've remained unspent, is because, as you mentioned, we can't find, or people can't find homes that are affordable enough. So the down payment assistance, they need far more than what we can supply. In the case of Newtown, their homes are permanently affordable. They provide down payment assistance. Can CDBG funds be used with a CLT, the Community Land Trust, and in some kind of cooperative agreement, because they have permanently affordable homes that have buyers that need down payment assistance?
Thanks for the clarity.
Okay.
So, yeah, when homes are available for sale through the land trust,
Mm-hmm.
these funds are absolutely eligible to be used with the purchase of a land trust home. There just haven't been any for sale in Tempe. Now, that is one thing, these funds are jurisdictionally bound. So yeah, the Land Trust may have homes for sale in Chandler or Mesa or Glendale,
Right,
but we
right.
would not allow
Sure.
these
Right.
funds to be used there. But we definitely do partner with the town at every opportunity when they have houses that are available.
And with
for sale.
microestates, you'd be able to
Yes.
partner with them. Great, thank you.
Okay, so, and then moving into the tenant-based rental assistance, the Home TBRA program is a 2-year housing subsidy program that we have that's specifically designed for individuals who are homeless or would be homeless due to fleeing domestic violence. That program currently has 42 active participants in the program. We do have a waiting list on that. So this reallocation of fund, or this renewed allocation of funding would allow us to continue the assistance for those households for another couple of years. Additionally, we are expecting $227,000 worth of program income to come in over the next year. With the down payment program, anytime a home is either no longer used as a primary residence, it's sold, or you refinance for a reason other than a rate reduction, we do require a repayment of the down payment assistance that was provided. So by adding the $227,000 with the $365,000, that would give us a grand total of $592,000 in order to be able to provide down payment or housing subsidies for TBRA, which would allow us to not only maintain the program but increase the program from the 42 participants currently to around 50 participants on that program. So again, this is based on flat funding. If anything were to change in the award from HUD, these would be massaged accordingly. And again, we're definitely waiting on the census to see what this might do with our future funding. So as far as the next steps would be, we would definitely like to hear any recommendations from Mayor and Council. We would be completing our public meetings in December and January to solicit all of the input we can get. From there, after the last meeting in January, we'll be updating our recommendations. You know, again, if we had any substantial changes to what we were recommending, we would definitely come back and provide an update. We would anticipate to come to Mayor and Council for consideration for approval in April of 2020. Once that is done, then we would provide the documents to HUD for their consideration and or approval by May of 2020. And that would complete the process and get us started in the new 5-year plan.
Great. First, thank you so much for soliciting feedback from our public for the next upcoming 5 years. I think that's important. Obviously, we're big on making sure that we hear from our residents. But I can't stress enough the federal programs that we're talking about today. They're so vital to and important to our affordable housing strategy that we have in our community. The CDBG and the home funds are allocated obviously through the federal government, as you mentioned, and the amount that we get really is decided based on the population. And I've spoken many times as a chair of MAG and being involved with the census count. It's so important that we get everybody counted, and I can't stress that enough, making sure that everyone gets counted not only for CDBG funds, but for state funds and state share revenues, et cetera. It's so important. I just want a clarification. The $155,000 that you said that was rolling over, if I understand you correctly, you want to put that back into redevelopment or acquisition?
So for the CDBG, we had funding left over that
Right.
would stay in acquisition. For home, for the down payment assistance, that would roll over and remain in down payment assistance.
Okay, good. So, okay. Great, thank you. Any questions? Yes, Councilmember Adams?
Just a couple of things. First of all, good work getting 953 people in the survey, and I like the ice cream truck idea. So that's
Is it
great.
here?
And then I would like to see more partnering with the Eris Foundation, as they also deal with a lot of the homeless in the city. And I think that would be a good way to partner with the Eris Foundation. All in all, good work. I like that you're still reaching out to getting more public support and input. Thank you. Good job.
Vice Mayor?
You're both such a compendium of knowledge. Thank you so much. And I know you know all of this in your sleep. Yvonne, I just had a question about the census new formula. When will that actually take effect, where there'll be a redistribution or difference in funds? What year, fiscal year will that be?
As I understand it, it usually takes the census about plus or minus a year to get all the final numbers out. With the way the HUD formulas work, we're usually 2 to 3 years behind once that information comes out. So we're probably looking, off the top of my head, 23, 24.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Councilmember Arredondo Savage?
Thank you, Mayor. Just really quick, and I 100% agree with the Councilmember Adams in regards to having the 953 respondents, which is, you're not even done. And I think the population of individuals that you were able to survey is incredible, even if you had to bribe them a little. Nothing wrong with that. Or incentivize them, maybe that's a nicer word. But I like Kona Ice, so if you need something from me, you know, I'm just saying, Kona Ice would be good. But anyway, I agree with the mayor in regards to, you know, our services that we provide are really the heartbeat of Tempe, and you guys continue to do a phenomenal job and really making sure that you are addressing the needs of our residents to the best of our abilities. So thank you so much for continuing to do that, to listening to us, listening to the rest of the staff, the departments, and our residents to make sure that we are meeting the needs and we are making people's lives better. So thank you to each one of you, to Paul, to little Blondie. I can't help it. I love it. I think it's a great color. So Levon, thank you guys so much for your work. Naomi, to your team, you guys continually to rock it. And, you know, I couldn't be more proud of this organization and the work that we do and the continued efforts that we continually make to make this, I think, the most outstanding city in the state. So thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
before staff leaves, just real quick, we have a really exciting announcement. The Tempe Housing Authority had just finished up a multi-year HUD Section 8 corrective review process. I know that we've been here on more than one occasion to let you know the interim status of that, and they have just completed that review. And once again, the Tempe Housing Authority has been certified as a high-performing agency. And obviously, if you know the history to get to where we were, to where we are, took a lot of work, a lot of really good work by really good people, two of which are sitting in front of you here, Paul and Levon, of course, but Naomi and her entire team, I know, worked tirelessly to get to this place. So going off of what Councilmember Arredondo Savage has said in terms of, you know, the pride we take in our city, we should take a moment to appreciate and show a lot of pride and the work that was done by this group to get to the place to be a high-performing agency under Section 8. So thank you very much for all your great work.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go back to, we're going to move back to item 2A, which is going to be the update on the Smith Industrial Innovation Hub. Thank you for our guests, the Urban Land Institute, for coming. Have Donna or Jill.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Thank you for having us this evening. We're here to talk about the Smith Industrial Innovation Hub pilot project and to update you on that. And my colleagues are here with me today to talk about the Aztec report, which relates to furthering the vision for that area. Kristen Busby from ULI, Arizona, and Steve Lindley from Cushman and Wakefield. So just to remind us all, on March 1st of 2018, our Economic Development Director, Donna Kennedy, provided a briefing to you all on our department's Innovation Hub strategy, which is to create a live, work, and recreate environment in our 9 innovation hubs across the community, which correspond with our employment areas as well, to attract new businesses, grow existing ones, and create a vibrant area, areas across the community. To further develop this vision, we conducted 3 public meetings, and then in addition to that, of course, we had the Aztec panel tour and report that you're going to be hearing about. At those meetings, we had property owners, we had students, we had a variety of real estate professionals and other area stakeholders that provided us input on those 3 different occasions. Key items that were discussed at those related to safety and infrastructure needs, transportation concerns, and future plans in the surrounding area for transit and new development. We've worked with a variety of colleagues in different departments throughout this process as well, and this effort is supported by the character area plan for Apache, the Tempe General Plan 2040, the Tempe Transportation Master Plan, and the Smith Innovation Hub strategy is also incorporated into the Tempe Urban Core Master Plan. So just to kind of let you all know, that's where we are, that's some background, and I would just like to turn it over now to my colleagues to tell you a little bit more about the recommendations from the plan. What I didn't say is, and you will see a map shortly, this particular area that we're talking about is located between McClintock and Loop 101 and Rio Salado Parkway and University Drive. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Mitchell, members of the Tempe Council. It's truly our pleasure to be here this evening to present to you some of the findings of the ULI Arizona Technical Assistance Panel for the Smith Innovation Hub. For some who might not know who the Urban Land Institute is, I'm just going to say quickly we're a global nonprofit that was formed 83 years ago to be a resource for responsible land use and to help support creating thriving communities. We have 42,000 members across the world, both representing public and private sectors in all disciplines of the real estate and development industry. And here in Arizona, we have over 1,100 members. The program we're talking to you about tonight, the Aztec Program, we affectionately call, is actually an outgrowth of a ULI National Advisory Services Program that was formed in 1947 to forge partnerships between the public and private sector to study land use challenges. And in Arizona, we started the program about 15 years ago, and it's a true resource to bring the private and public sectors together to work alongside studying different land use questions and challenges and to come up with market-based solutions and ideas. So it's truly a time-tested and proven program that brings our diverse and extensive multidisciplinary network of members together. And just a particular note on this slide, I'm just going to note that it says we offer fresh, unbiased perspectives, and I just wanted to note that because by our ULI charter, we are a non-lobbying organization, so it's really rather our sweet spot is to bring the best practice ideas and to be a trusted, neutral convener. So as Jill was saying, and here's the map that she was referencing, some of the overall goals for the Tempe Aztec. The Smith Hub is a designated opportunity zone, so really looking for ways to maximize its potential. There's a lot of anticipated and growth happening now nearby, so to develop synergy with the major redevelopment and investment activities that are happening in places like Novus and the Rio 2100. And to be really thoughtful and to be thinking ahead about transit supportive land use that could be ready for a potential proposed streetcar that might extend along Rio Salado to Mesa Riverview. But really one of the most important goals was to support all of the focus, the great focus the city has now in its urban core through the urban core master planning efforts, and to examine ways to enhance the future needs for commercial and residential development in the hub. This ULI panel took place a couple months ago in the spring and comprised an impressive 9-member panel of industry thought leaders, one of which we are so fortunate to have today, and who moderated the entire day's panel. Steve Lindley, as Jill mentioned, he's the executive director of Cushman Wakefield, and he happens also to be one of our ULI national leaders, foremost leaders on art and creative placemaking. So Steve is going to talk to you about some of the ideas that the panel discussed for your consideration and implementation. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Steve.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. So I like to frame things a little bit. So get the big picture, and then we'll kind of come up with some of the solutions here. So Kristen just said, our heart at ULI is to create sustaining and thriving communities. And when I look at the Tempe goals for the Innovation Hub and some of the other things, your goal is to create live, work, and play environments that attract and grow businesses. They overlap. So for us, what does this look like? And what we have found is that places that are vibrant, that are thriving, that have energy and interesting, of which Tempe's one. You guys know that. You've done a great job, right? They attract people who want to live and play there, And those people are the talent that all the employers want that cause businesses to locate and grow in those cities. So one of the things that we've learned is that the most interesting, vibrant places have mixed uses, they have mixed density, they have mixed income, they have mixed culture, and a real easy way to look at that is when everything's the same, it's boring, right? Monoculture, mono everything is really boring to people, and boring places are not places that thrive in our world today. So let's kind of, now we look at that Smith Innovation Hub. Go back one, Kristen. You look at that. And so a lot of places where we're asked to collaborate, we're going into places that are blighted, that have vacancy, that have problems. Smith Innovation Hub is not broken. There's nothing broken with it right now. It's functioning, it's mostly industrial, it's well occupied by super successful businesses. So it's a little bit different, but here's the key. The strength of that location is its vulnerability because it's single use, it's single density, it's a 9-to-5 place, and then everyone leaves. And it's right in the middle of a community that's growing around it in a lot of different ways. So left untouched, I see this as a risk for the city. Creating a vision, I see this as an opportunity for you. And one of the things I'm impressed by with the city of Tempe, you guys are willing to go with big gnarly visions. You know, Tempe Town Lake just had its, and look, who would have thought? I'm an ASU grad from the 80s. I used to walk across the Salt River, right? So now it looks like that. That's very cool. And so I want to challenge you guys to think big gnarly visions, right? And so here's a little bit what I look at, and here's the main thing we looked at. How do you honor the businesses and people who are already there, who've made that area successful, while creating a live, work, play environment that's going to allow it to thrive in the future and be something that's a big asset to the city of Tempe? So, go ahead, Kristen. So, here's something interesting. A lot of great cities have arts districts, they have warehouse districts. This has a lot of aspects of that, but one of the most important part of all those places is you got to keep it gritty a little bit, right? You don't need to go clean it up and turn it into super block, brand new things. Gritty equals cool, cool equals places where people want to live, work, and play. And so it doesn't feel like a location to us for large-scale development. No giant towers, no super block development, something like that. That grittiness of lots of smaller businesses and buildings in there, to us, feels like the opportunity. But because it's single use, you guys need to be looking for a mix of compatible uses to put in there. Looking for the policies and tools, being a little bit organic about it, letting it happen. Industrial and residential can coexist. We see live work places in different places as they go more to maker places instead of old dirty industrial. We see tactical infill residential, live work, artist lofts, small scale development, maybe some a missing middle type of development, but not big super block developments. Getting some services in there. The most important part for us is people think of those old square shoebox industrial buildings as kind of boring. If you look at Roosevelt Row and you look at Mon Orchid, or you look at some of their old square old warehouses, the old Dell Webb house, as soon as you bomb them with art and put creativity in there and creative uses and different uses in there, all of a sudden they're places where people want to thrive. You have a lot of those buildings in that place. So incentivize adaptive reuse instead of letting the buildings get turned down. I think most of you guys know the Circuit, the building in there that got the Oscar. It was an adaptive reuse. No semiconductor plant was going back to that neighborhood, and now it's a place with a thriving business. That's cool. I would want to be around that. So next slide. So I talked about art. I do a lot of national speaking and consulting on arts and culture. Arts and culture is the low-hanging fruit. I will guarantee you that in that area right now, there's already creativity that exists. There's makers doing maker things. There may be distilleries. There's artists. There's import-export places. You have to find those people. You have to honor them. You have to connect them. You have to support them. You have to grow the brand. Rename brand Smith Innovation Hub is kind of boring. That's what our panel thought. And we're real estate people. We have come up with boring names for our real estate projects, so we'll let somebody else figure out what you would call it. cool buildings, maybe make them a food truck hub, the ugly warehouses. You have probably a lot of artists. I know you have a lot of artists here in the city. Finding ways to get them to bomb the buildings with murals, that would be a perfect location with that. But other types of creativity, food trucks, anything that goes in that area. And many thriving cities have arts districts, right, that do that. This might be the place for you guys as a city. Activating public life, it's got to go beyond 9 to 5, right? And that's not an easy thing to get there, but looking for public spaces, you could start with pop-ups. Make sure that the city has policies in place that allow that find that. You're partnering with the local businesses there, and then let the entrepreneurs, the makers, the creatives test the ideas, kind of fall in love with the location, start to take ownership of that location, and then you enhance it with the branding and marketing to try to take it to the next level. And then as you start to find opportunities where people may want to build residential in there, that's going to take it to the next level. Building the market potential. You want to study the market for the right mix. You're going to have a lot of thriving industrial businesses in there, and you should honor those, like I said before. But over time, that's going to transition. They're going to move on or sell, or different things are going to happen. So looking right now at the things that just don't feel good, which is like barbed wire and junkyards and stuff like that, trying to find a way to not have that there. Looking to differentiate the residential. We all know the podium and stick apartment complexes, the big ones that we have. That may not be the right use here if you can find smaller scale. We talked about pop-ups, looking at policies to promote affordability, which is huge for the mixed income part of thriving neighborhoods. And then the more turnkey, the better, plug and play. Connectivity. Right now, that area is pretty much just good for cars. And we know that areas that are just good for cars don't thrive, especially in today's world, and they don't attract talent. Now, most people are going to take their cars no matter what, but you got to give options. So if you look down this list here, you're going to see a lot of these things that have walkability in them. Micro blocks. There's sidewalks that are not finished in there. You guys should finish those. Look at the edges and the streetscapes, maybe linear parks, trees, shade. Start investing in the infrastructure there so that people can walk, they can scooter, they can ride bikes. The streetcar, we'd love it if it came in there, and I know that's in the vision, right? So that's another option. Buses, I know that you guys can look at that there. Shade is a huge deal. Addressing the alleys. People have fallen in love with alleys across the nation. Alleys are cool again, right? There's alleys there that if somebody wants to bomb with paint and turn into a pop-up, could create a brand. And then here, this is really important, parking as a district solution. And so I brag on the city of Tempe to my other cities where I advise, because you guys have the best downtown urban infill parking management, right, through DTC. People, when they want to go someplace, they point their car at that place, drive around a little bit, and they found parking, right? But not every building there has parking. And so one of the things that we like about the circuit is it had a giant parking lot. Not all the rest of the buildings have it, and I'm not sure we want to tear buildings down to create parking, but we're going to need that. So incentivizing and looking for district parking solutions, which you have in downtown, so you know how to do it, but looking for how those will fit in there will be real key to letting this area over time grow into something different. So here's one priority I think is big. Move quick. There's two challenges you have. One is opportunity zone money will flow into this area. I just talked to a developer who's doing an opportunity zone project on Hardy and Alameda in a different innovation district right now. That money's ready to go, but if you don't create the vision, incentivize what you want, it's going to go into something that's not in line with that vision, and that money times out. It's gone after a few years, right? The second part to moving quick for you guys is the market's hot, Tempe's hot, everyone knows it's the place to be. Without the vision, development is going to happen there kind of almost by right and in ways that may not be compatible. So the faster you can get on this, the strength of the market is your opportunity, but it's also your challenge if all of a sudden the market takes over and it doesn't go. So some of those other priorities are more straightforward. We were just talking about housing there. So next steps, engage the community, engage the community. You guys are good at that. You know how to do that. That's fundamental. But especially in an area like this, and this happened in our TAP, there's a lot of people who really have a heart for this neighborhood and want to see good things happen there, the business owners there. Mixed uses, bring in people, look for the fine-grained connectivity, branding we talked about, housing and adaptive reuse, art and placemaking, find a way to incentive and put it in there, engage your partners, and stay a leader in public transit. And I'll just finish with one last thing. You guys have a super enviable position, which is you're a thriving, growing economy right now. It's exciting what's happening here. You have fantastic transportation, and Tempe's got a brand name that carries outside of the Phoenix metro area pretty well. So if you can combine that with a vision and opportunity that we kind of think might be right for the Smith Innovation Hub, we're super excited at ULI to see what would happen over the future years. Any questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Councilman Navarro?
Can you hear me? Yeah. First of all, thank you. I mean, this is tremendous. This is absolutely the vision that we need to take. I'm very impressed with the report you guys have given us. This is absolutely what I imagine this area has the potential to be. The grainy, the unique, and all that other stuff, let it organically happen itself. So when you talk about opportunities, are you talking about tax incentives that might apply to this area? And if that's the case, do you know much about that or when they might expire?
The opportunity zone.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's expiring as we speak right now, right? It's gonna, without getting into the weeds, because it's pretty extensive, right? 2019 is a good year. 2020 is an okay year, and it starts to go down until it's gone. And I think in 2023, do you remember? Yeah. So there's about, and so the OZ money is already coming into the city. You see that right now on the project I mentioned on Hardy that's being developed, Hardy and Alameda. But I'm not sure you can go quick enough, so you're going to have to take whatever you've got in place now and just kind of do that.
And I think that's a great point that you brought up, because I think that's our advantage to really get out and market. I know Donna and her team is absolutely on top of that stuff, and I appreciate the vision you guys are sharing with us, because I think that's exactly what we need. That's exactly what that area of town is going to be into, because everything around it is really going to go up and pop up and probably be more new, so to speak, as that could be creative a little bit more organically, I guess. You talk about open space within that area. What do you see as open space? Would that probably, because I'm trying to think, where would that be, and then would you have to take some buildings out, so to speak?
Ideally, no. If there are some buildings that need to be taken out, that's the opportunity, but there's linear parks. There's pocket parks, there's corner parks, there's parts of lots that can be turned into parks, there's parts of parking lots that can be turned into parks. I don't think this is an area that needs a big giant park, right? And I don't think that would be the right thing for this area, but it does need shade and walkability and places to gather and different things like that. And it's going to take some creativity, but we've seen the linear parks and the pocket parks and different things like that in similar areas to this.
And the last thing is the parking piece that you brought up. I think that's absolutely important. I think there's strategically for our city, we do this right. We utilize our light car or streetcar or whatever modes of transportation to get within and from the city, then easy access into the onto the 101 or 202, wherever it may go from there. But I think absolutely we need to get some of that in there.
Think about creative strategies, and I know you guys are doing this, like flexible work times when people come in or out, and incentivizing businesses for that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Steve, I want to thank you and Kristen, really thank the Urban Land Institute, because your time, your energy, your expertise, I think your vision is going to help us guide us through what we're trying to do here. So it's very much appreciated. And I like that you identified some of the low-hanging fruit. I mean, we're known as an art community, believe it or not. And I know that we can help identify more of the low-hanging fruit with more of the vision that we have. And it could be the street lights, it could be the sidewalks that you mentioned. I'm really interested in horizontal parks. I don't know what that looks like, but I know that what I've seen is when the private sector sees the public sector invest, they're going to do that tenfold. And yeah, you've seen that through Tempe right now, what's happening. So I think that's something that's really exciting. And I really want to commend this council as well as our economic development team on the innovation hubs that we're creating here, because it really does do exactly what we're trying to do. And we're open to work with the developers. I know there's a time crunch. I happened to spend time at the ULI office in DC on this particular issue when it first came out, with some of the other, with Glenn Hammer and some folks through GPEC. So it's kind of interesting. So thank you so much for your vision and what you're trying to do here, and helping us be even more creative than we are. We can always do something different.
You're already doing a good job, and that's not just lip
No, we
service,
can't
you
rest
know,
on
right?
that. We got to
Yeah, I agree.
continue to move forward. Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Steve, Kristen, Jill, thank you guys so very much for your work and everything that you've done. I think our vision for the Smith Innovation Hub, I don't know why I don't like Smith Innovation Hub. I don't know. Jones Innovation Hub.
Right.
So I get it. So it makes you start thinking about, some ways to really bring it some vibrancy and to really bring it alive. And I don't know what that might be, but one thing I'd like to get some follow-up information on, it doesn't have to be tonight, is you mentioned some incentives and some code changes and things to that effect. I would kind of like to know maybe some other areas that you have seen some great incentives that have worked really well, maybe not so well. As you know, we've just done the Broadway Makers District that's so new, to kind of reinvent a whole other one at the same time without really seeing the results over there, kind of gives me a little bit of a pause, to be honest. But at the same time, I realize I think some of these things could be very easy to implement, whether it's a lot of those sidewalks aren't completed, like you said. It's not really great for connectivity. There's a lot of things that I think that we can do. So it would be great to kind of have a prioritized list of things to get us in that push us in the area of the vision that we're trying to create, because I don't think we know specifically what that is, but I think we know what we want is going to be better than what we see now. And I think you're right. I mean, I think we are primed to be able to do some really innovative things there. I just want to be smart about it and, responsible at the same time. So I don't need to reinvent the wheel. If you've seen some other great, maybe small incentives, because some of the ones that you mentioned, I don't know how realistic those are. Not saying that we can't do it. I'm just saying, is there some other things that we could really consider?
Thank you. So we definitely can get back to you with some more information on specific incentives. On that note of a plan or a list of items, we'll be coming back to you all with an action plan for the area, and we'll also be coming back to you when it's time to submit for the CIP with some specific infrastructure projects. There's actually one programmed in currently, as you see in the memo there, to add some sidewalks and lighting in the area. And we'll continue to ask for that kind of funding, because those are some of the needs that were identified in all of the community meetings. So it was a common thread that we heard from the community.
And I just remembered, I think that's something that's so crucial for us with our 5-year budget, with our CIP coming up right now, that we're going to be talking about, that you help us identify those. So when we go through our CIP, that we can say, okay, the sidewalks, could be the street lighting, could be some of the trees and the shade canopy. That's something that we should probably do now, because once we do that, the private sector sees the public sector investing, and then it just folds over, it keeps going.
Absolutely.
One other real quick, we were talking about incentives. There's one that I know I hear from my developer clients. Adaptive reuse policy, zoning policy. Whenever they have to do an adaptive reuse building that has X infrastructure and X qualities, and then upgrade them to modern standard, new construction standards, right? The cost almost automatically stops the property from being redeveloped. But if it doesn't get redeveloped, it still has all those same qualities. And so looking for creative, I know City of Phoenix implemented this
We have it too.
adaptive policy
We have it too.
reuses. You do?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a big one, right? That's a huge benefit.
Vice Mayor
It's good-
Cubey.
Good to meet you, Kristen, in the flesh. And I just want to make a note, and that some folks may not be aware of, but there's a District Council Task Force for Health and Equity, and I know that Tempe is a part of that, ASU, and Braden K has been a big part of that global ULI initiative, and we're hoping to see some good results out of that. That's a big commitment that the global ULI has met to Arizona, and we have a hand in that in Tempe, so thanks so much for involving us in that really great opportunity to see the interconnection of health and equity and housing in the urban core. I just had one question, because you mentioned, I think the second to last slide, that there might be opportunities to expand the density bonus program and HYPE program to the Innovation Hub, and I wonder if that goes against the other recommendation that you want to keep the general heights and the general land use similar, and how will we accomplish both?
So I think that you just don't want to increase the density bonus to this much. Maybe
But a
this
little bit.
much, yeah, something like that. Give people, you know, if you're trying to build a really tall building and you get that much more density, you can build it. But if the area is only good for 2 or 3 stories and you get a 4th or a 5th, that might be just enough. Something where it's a little bit more incremental, but still you're not incentivizing beyond what the vision is for this area here.
Thank you.
Councilmember Adams, then Councilmember Chin.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The project is very exciting. I like the direction we are going. You have my full support on it. I'm glad that we mentioned arts in your presentation. I think that's important, and then the trees and the shade and just having that sense of community. And I also am happy about the repurposing of the buildings instead of just tearing them all down, and let's try to repurpose them. And I think that really helps keep the character of the community in that area. So thank you very much for your hard work. Great job.
Councilmember Chin.
Thank you, Mayor. By the way, these microphones are fantastic. You had the word or the phrase food truck listed at least 3 times, so you got my attention. I'm always hungry, and I love food trucks. And you've also referenced in the report, I noticed a couple of areas that I visited, so I think I see the vision, and I love it. It's great, and I think it's a good match for Tempe. So a couple of things that you mentioned, and I thank you for your advice and your input on this. You talked about keeping the grit, and I agree. It's artsy, it's gritty. Don't overwork the area, right? I wonder, there are a lot of food events in the valley now that I wonder if we can begin attracting people. So it's similar to that, where do you build a sidewalk? Well, let's see where the well-worn path is already in the grass, right? So something to that effect, if we could attract some food truck events or food events to the area in usable space. As you mentioned, there's some usable space now. So before we overwork the area, let's see what naturally, organically comes about. So just
One
that.
of the things I often say is that don't think about place as buildings. Think of it as people. And so place without people is nothing. It doesn't even exist. Who cares? As cool as it could possibly be if there's nobody there. If you have a ton of people in a place that's sort of gritty and maybe not meant for that, you have a cool place that people want to go to. And
So
there's
maybe
ways-
attract the people,
Yeah.
begin attracting, so
Yes.
that they know that's what we're planning to do in the area.
And
right?
people love arts, creativity,
Right.
food, things beside just regular buildings.
Right, great, thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, next item is our START tool results, the strategy tool for aligning resources in Tempe. All right. Welcome, Ken. Mark and Rosa, thank you.
There we go.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Ken Jones, Deputy City Manager. Well, go ahead and introduce yourself.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Mark Day, Municipal Budget Director.
Good evening, Rosa Chowsky, Director of Strategic Management and Diversity.
So, Mayor and Council, at the Council's direction in the last several years, we've begun getting you information for the budget sooner, and that's at your request. You had said, we can't make really good budget decisions unless you give us information in time to notify staff of our priorities. So we've worked really hard as a staff on that in the last several years. In return, the City Council has taken that information, applied it, in focusing on outcomes and has given staff really good feedback early in the budget process so that we can tailor the budget towards your needs. So that has worked really well in the last several years. So tonight, we're not here to make budget decisions, and we really don't want you to identify your budget priorities. What we're here for is for you to have a discussion and to tell us how we can bring you more information during the budget development process on those things that you think we might need to accelerate. Similarly, recently you looked at the youth counseling program and you said, bring back to us some budgeting scenarios and some funding scenarios to accelerate and to improve that process. We are going to come back to you in the budget process with exactly what you asked for. Here are some scenarios and here are the costs of those scenarios so that you can compare those in the budget process. That's what we're asking you tonight. Which of our performance measures do you think need to be accelerated? Which ones are we falling behind on? What are those outcomes that you think need a little kick here? And we will bring back to you models during the budget process that show various funding levels and how those will accelerate those performance measures. Mark's going to talk about some of those that you have given us in the past and how we've done with those and how this process works into our budget process. And then Rosa is going to do what we've done the last couple years, which is describe for you those things that rose to the top of your START tool responses, which is at least 4 of you gave points to those performance measures, and it's within the top 50% of points that were allocated. There are 7 of those this year. Last year, I think there were 14 or 15. So you focused your consensus on some things that you might want to address. But I want to make sure you understand this conversation tonight is not limited to those 7 things that we present. We also tried to identify those things that council members thought were their highest priorities but didn't make it in that top so that you can see what your colleagues are thinking. So this is really just a conversation for you tonight to say, please come back to us with models of how we might accelerate those things. That's what we're looking for tonight. And now Mark's going to take you through how this process fits into the budget process a little better.
Okay, as we begin the operating and capital budget process, we'd like to briefly review the timeline with you and the process for incorporating your input into establishing the budget priorities for the upcoming budget. So based on your feedback tonight on the initial priorities, staff will begin the process of developing acceleration models, and we'll come back at a later date with information on strategies to advance the prioritized performance measures. So these strategies could include collaboration. So if you remember in last year's budget process, we had a lot of multi-departmental submissions where departments collaborated together to address accelerating a performance measure, shifting of resources or requests for additional funding. And as Ken mentioned, this is the earliest in the budget process that we have received information on priorities for the upcoming budget, and your feedback is that you give is very helpful as departments begin to develop their operating and capital budget requests. In February will be the introduction of the proposed CIP projects for the next 5-year CIP, and then in March we'll present the initial recommended CIP that incorporates the prioritized performance measures related to the CIP projects, along with strategies for their acceleration. So for example, last year we presented the Pavement Quality Index Performance Measure Acceleration Model that included options for no additional funding, $6 million in additional funding, and even $16 million in additional funding over the 5-year CIP, with council approving advancing the measure with $3 million in additional funding. Then as we move down the timeline, at the budget review session in April, we present the operating budget supplemental requests that have also incorporated the prioritized performance measures. And like the CIP, we will present strategies for their acceleration and any proposed funding requests. You'll note there are several meetings scheduled from February to June for you, and as Ken mentioned, this is not we're not making budget decisions tonight, so there'll be plenty of opportunities for additional feedback and input as we work through the budget process. And then on the bottom part of the slide there, you'll see we've listed the opportunities for the public to provide input to council on the budget priorities for next fiscal year. This includes both online resources as well as in-person opportunities. And as we receive this feedback from the residents, we'll be sharing that with the council. Okay, last year, council provided feedback to accelerate 3 performance measures during the budget process, and this is just a brief update on the percent change in performance from 2017 to 2019 on those 3 measures. The first one is 1.05, the feeling of safety in the city, as you can see, is trending up with a 1.3% increase. The next one, performance measure, was 1.22, Pavement Quality Index, or PQI, and that, with early estimates, is expected to increase by 3.3%. And then the final measure was 1.23, feeling of safety in the parks, and there are 6 metrics, actually, that go along with that. So overall, positive direction for feeling of safety in the parks. 5 of the 6 categories are trending up. You will see that city day parks is down by almost 4%, but we've seen some significant improvements for parks at night, both neighborhood and desert parks.
As we have in the past, we always like to give any updates regarding any of the performance measures, and this time we only have about 5. I'm happy to share that our alley maintenance crew out of Municipal Utilities has asked to have a performance measure. We know the residents resoundingly say in the community survey it's very important to them. So we are developing, in partnership with an intern from the Strategic Management Office and the alley maintenance crew, identifying the first ever alley maintenance pavement quality, or quality. Much like our pavement quality, we're going to have the first index, much like our pavement quality. No other city has done that, so we are excited about developing that. The caller wait time is a minor change, it's just in the language from 90-second wait time. Our software system does not allow for measuring the 90-second wait time, so we have to have the 60. The employee work-related needs is just changing some language to match the community survey question. The Community Development Department has identified a process satisfaction survey, which will measure basically the satisfaction of customers through permitting, plan review, and planning, on timeliness, care and courtesy by staff, requesting handling and resolution, knowledge of staff, and process navigation. And this is actually a citywide initiative on customer service where we take 5 data points, and those are the areas that we wish to measure in all our departments as far as how well we're delivering services. And then lastly, the proposed diversity supplier program, and that is just a placeholder, but we're working on developing how our historically underutilized businesses are doing business in Tempe, making sure we keep a watchful eye on that. As Kim mentioned, the highest score in performance measures that received 50% of the total points allocated and were assigned at least 1 point by 4 council members are listed there. I won't go through them in the interest of time, but I would like to just give you a quick snapshot of how they're performing right now. So we heard from ULI stating that Tempe is the place where people want to come, thrive, work, live, visit, and recreate. And with every successful story comes some challenges, and traffic is one of them. We see this as an opportunity for us to work as a city and develop innovative ways to address the traffic congestion. So one of the things with Shelley Seiler's group that we're working on, historically you see it's underdeveloped. And just to explain to the public why it's underdeveloped, it's not because we haven't been working at it. We realize that the sensors that we do have at the intersections operate off Wi-Fi. But one of the things that we committed through strategic planning and open data policy is the integrity of our data is very important. Those are the things that help us make the decisions in allocating resources and, quite frankly, being honest and transparent with the public. So the data with the Wi-Fi system on our sensors, we realize the Bluetooth sensors give us more reliable data. So we now have the Bluetooth sensor data, and we're happy we now have that data. So what we're doing is, as part of the strategies, is partnering with IT, our office, and Shelley Seiler's transportation team to look now at strategies that help address the congestion issue that we hear about in the community and the business survey. One of the things Tempe is proud of is our smart city initiatives, and I know that smart city initiative concept is one of the things that people seem to not understand very clearly. What does that really mean? Well, just to make it very clear, in Tempe, it's not just adopting technology that we think might be fancy and the trend. we adopt smart city initiatives or technology that leverages outcomes and solutions to our challenges. And that's what we're going to be doing, coming together with Shelley Seiler, IT, and our department to look at adopting maybe artificial intelligence, machine learning, anything that's out there that perhaps helps us capture the data and have us respond quickly to the issues. The next one is pavement quality, and one of the performance measures that I think all of us are familiar with. Our baseline is 59, was 59, and our target is 70. So it is working with Isaac Chevaliera's group. They're now performing the audit of our streets, and it is expected to be at 61 by February 2020. So they continue to work on our neighborhood streets also. But one of the things I wanted to share with you, as Mark mentioned, the council asked for an additional $3 million towards pavement quality last year in this budget cycle or last budget cycle. One of the things that, in speaking with Isaac and his team, is the maintenance of our streets is just as important as improving the streets. So they have 2 CIPs, one CIP in improving the quality of our streets, but also keeping a watchful eye, having a CIP that is for the maintenance, and that's for slurry sealing and basically the maintenance of those things. So they will be requesting a supplemental, and I just wanted to share that with the council because I think sometimes we just expect the streets to be remediated and that they just stay that way, and they don't. Obviously, we have a lot of people in our city. Right-of-way landscape, our baseline in 2017 was 63, as you see there, and our target is to have an 81, and that is based and measured out of our community survey as a satisfaction question on our survey. We are currently, with the last survey, we're at 59.30, and it's just a small tick down. But one of the things that we have looked at, I know Sean Thompson just gave a presentation during one of the city manager's 5-minute updates. They're working very hard, and one of the strategies was really how do we collect data, GIS mapping of our landscaping. And that's really where we have spent the last few years trying to capture what is it that we have, and quite frankly, kind of like pavement quality, what is the priorities and how do we remediate and improve our landscaping. So will be requesting a CIP of $3 to $4 million to advance revitalization, or one of the things that they'll be looking at and putting forward a CIP to improve that also. Feeling of safety in the park is number 4, at least that it came up. I won't go in too much detail because Mark just gave you a quick snapshot of that's all trending up with the exception of day in our city parks. But I do want to say that that has been a very collaborative effort between departments, human services, PD, and not just looking at giving money towards things, but really collaborating, looking at how do we activate these areas so people understand what we're trying to do and feeling safer in the parks. We can flip through those. Thank you. Ending homelessness. This is performance measure that it looks at ending homelessness. So with that, it's a huge undertaking, not just to Tempe, not just to the state of Arizona, nationally. So what we identified is sub-measures to make sure that we're keeping an understanding of how are we looking at how rare people who are experiencing homelessness, how rare it is. We're hoping that it's very brief if it does happen, and the retention of housing for individuals experiencing homelessness. So just looking at briefly, our baseline in 2018 was identified as 1,117 homeless, and in the recent study, or the recent tool that we use, which is Homeless Management Information System, HMIS, which I'll refer to that again so I don't have to keep referring to the long title, identified currently 1,207 homeless. As part of the performance measure, an additional data point that's tracked is individuals experiencing homelessness. The next question we usually ask is how many of these homeless that were identified are new homeless or identified as new individuals experiencing homelessness. And in 2019, it was identified as 679, which was 483. Our target is to reach 434. So we keep working on that. Another key metric is the number of people diverted from homelessness who do not enter HMIS system. So this is really the prevention scale or our matrix, identifying how can we identify people who might be at the tipping point of becoming homeless and getting services to them so we don't get them into to that stage of life or that experience. And as you can see, the baseline was identified as 27, the target is 36, and we're at 24. The next metrics that we use is the average number of days from program entry into permanent supportive housing. That is really the end-all, be-all to eradicating homelessness, is permanent supportive housing. So we look at how quickly can we do that. We identified a baseline of 41 days in 2018, and I'm happy to say that it's trending down, which is where we want it to be, so it's a little tricky, so people usually get that confused. So we're at 35, which is exceeding the target of 36.
Vice Mayor?
Do you know how that compares regionally? Because I think I heard sort of anecdotally that we have one of the quickest times from program entry into permanent supportive housing. Is that,
I don't have the exact numbers for the county, but I know for the county numbers for total homeless, we went up 8% in Tempe, and the county was up 22%, if that helps.
Yeah, it does, thank you.
And then another matrix that we use is a number of people permanently housed. Baseline was 239 in 2018. We also didn't know what to expect or how quickly we would be housing folks. So the baseline and target was identified as 239, and I'm happy to say that we're at 366. So we'll be revisiting that target. Obviously, we're exceeding that target. So we'll be talking to staff about what we would like to do at that point. And then lastly, looking at the retention rate, which is very important. We don't want to just house individuals. We want to make sure that they're successful and stay in permanent housing. So we look at the target rate of 85% of the folks that we house, that they remain in housing. Baseline was 89, and I'm happy to say that it's at 89% currently. So number 6, feeling invited to participate in city's decisions. This is also measured through the community survey. The national benchmark was interesting enough, was only 34%, the national average for feeling invited to participate in the city. We exceeded that with our baseline 46%. We are working with Shauna's group now to look at perhaps increasing our target to be top 10% as opposed to the national average. We're currently at 45%. One of the things that we are looking at is obviously equity in action will have an influence as one of the strategies for improving how people are invited to participate in cities' decisions, and looking at digital engagement for our city. And lastly, the housing inventory ratio. This was a great collaborative effort with the Bloomberg Foundation, What Works Cities. As you recall, we presented to that. We worked with Human Services and identified that our current housing stock was, they basically identified and said, if you're able to keep the housing stock that you do have, a 49% affordable, 16% workforce, and then lastly, the market rate of 16. You're in good shape. One of the things is that it's a difficult thing, as we know. We've had plenty of conversations regarding that. But one of the strategies housing is using is affordable housing impact statement, and then obviously securing dedicated funding stream for development of affordable housing development in Tempe. And with that, if you have any questions regarding those, if not, I think we'll,
So Mayor and Council, just for our audience and all. Went off.
You're on.
I want to remind people that these are not the issues that the city council sees as the most important in the city. It's the issues that you've identified through your response to the START tool as those that might need some extra attention in the next fiscal year. There might be things that are just as important, but we're doing well, and you think that the pace at which we are achieving those goals is sufficient. So these are the things that you have expressed some concern about, that you might want more information. So with that, we hope this is a conversation amongst you all, and you can give us some consensus direction on those issues that you would like us to bring back some plans for.
Thanks, Ken. First, thank you guys very much. This is very helpful. And I know the council is appreciative of getting this information prior to our budget. I got to say, you mentioned it earlier, but slide 4, I got to get back to that. It talks about, it's really a snapshot of the investments that we've made, and you see the results. Let me see, where is that? It talks, right here, the impact on performance. Yeah, that one. That really speaks volumes, I think, because it shows the investments we made, and you see some of the results. Obviously, we like to have it all up, but we have one that went down, so we're going to obviously look and see what we can do there. I think it's also good to see that amongst the entire council, that there's a common thread with at least 50% of the points going towards the 7 priorities that you identified. I think that's something that's really important. Under slide 7, on the traffic delay, which I know is from the survey, I know in the urban core master plan documents, there's strategies that will help mitigate some of the traffic delays. Would it be possible for us at a future work study session to get a council presentation on this topic so that we can better understand the direction that this work is heading? And I know this is kind of relevant to with the traffic delays to the Smith Industrial Hub that was just before us. We were talking about that. So I think all this, with our budget coming up, I think if we can get something at a future work study session on that, I think that would be helpful for the council. And then it's, on slide 8, let me see here. I just took some notes. On the pavement quality index, it's our communities, everyone feels that reaching I don't want to ask my council colleagues, do we feel that is 2028 acceptable for us on this? Something we should be looking at based on our community survey results? That's something we should, as a council, maybe look at in the future. The right-of-way, gosh, it's not long ago that we had a great presentation from our staff on the right-of-way and the progress that we made on that, and you see it in some of throughout our city. Does the community survey, in any of the comments, do they give any indication why it has decreased?
Mayor, when Chris Tatham was here, he expressed to us that you should keep in mind, I'll use pavement quality as an example. When you said we want pavement quality to increase and we increase the funding for that, what people in the public see is a whole bunch of streets torn up. So we know that we're investing in that. And the measurement that was before you tonight about pavement quality is our actual physical measurement of the quality of the streets, which has improved.
Right.
In the citizen survey, it got worse.
There you go.
And you can expect some of that.
Because
And
of
I think this is similar. When we're out working in the landscapes, people see that. And if you survey them that night and say, how are the landscapes? They say, well, people are out working in them all the time. I don't know, they're all torn up. So you can expect that at some point, there will be a turnaround when you know you're investing in those things. So I think it's good to keep in mind that you're focusing on the outcome, which is better pavement quality. And when we do that, we can show you how that's improving.
That's good.
People's perception might not be consistent all the time.
Right. And then on slide 10 or page 10, the feeling of safety in the parks, I'm glad that we're making progress. That was a big issue for us not too long ago. It's good to see that the investment we made into the security and the additional resources with the HOPE team, that we're seeing some good progress to help to meet our goal and hopefully exceed it. So that's really great. Councilman Navarro?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and I have to agree with, I mean, I'm glad we did this little survey. It kind of gives us a gauge of, where we think we should go and how we should think as a council, and then, kind of reflect on the community surveys and stuff. When, and thank you for putting this all together, because the data on this really is big and supportive and really finding out our baselines, our target goals, and where we want to go. And to the mayor's point, I think that we need to speed up our pavement quality and make sure that, because as we go around and as I go around knocking on doors, you're hearing that's the issue. That's the number one issue out there. And it's the streets, it's the interior streets too, is where a lot of the neighbors are really concerned about too. And the parks is always going to be there, the quality of the parks. Obviously the right-of-ways and the quality of right-of-ways. And one of the things I was going to talk about with the right-of-ways, I know we're doing a great job on improving our right-of-ways on various parts. And I like what we've done, especially our entryways coming in from Phoenix and other parts of the cities, where you can really feel the difference as soon as you drive into Tempe, which is really what I'd love to get to is the higher quality as soon as you get in. One thing I would like to express though is I know we're using the same materials when we do all our right-of-ways, and I know there's probably a cost savings with that too. But my question is, when we talked about character areas and we talked about, identity, like Broadway corridor or the Broadway road, when they did those right-of-ways, very unique, very different, I think that still has to be kind of tied into the character areas and the quality and the types of, DG or whatever it may be. But with that being said, on maybe tying that in with the character areas, maybe it might be a little bit different. The vegetation might be a little bit different or not. Is also looking at and what I reflect on is when I was traveling through Palm Springs, the quality of the right-of-ways was really nice. But at the same time, it didn't look like it was much to maintain, because the fine soil or the red dirt was very compact, but at the same time looked very easy to maintain and manicure. I would like for staff to, if they have a chance, because when we did our first project off of Scottsdale Road, and granted, we didn't get a chance to really do it right because of the borders of the concrete that was around those medians. They kind of had to be redone, which would add a lot to the vibrancy of those right-of-ways. Is really look at, okay, is that rock quality enough? And is the vegetation working with that rock? I see in some areas that it probably works a little bit better. Maybe in some areas not so much, because the leaves and stuff get in the rock and then pretty soon it's just packed with leaves. So that's just one thing I would love for our people to really kind of look into and research. And I bring up the Palm Spring thing because it just seemed very easily manicured, but yeah, very beautiful.
Councilmember Adams, then Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. It's very helpful that you reach out to council early in this process, so I really appreciate that. You all make a great team, and just really is helpful to reach out early to us. I believe that we absolutely need to improve our pavement management program. I think it needs to be accelerated because we fell so far behind with the HERF cuts in the past, and so we have a lot of making up to do. So I would like to see that facilitated. I think the right-of-ways are so important to how the residents feel about the city and the look of the city, and I would like to see more money put into that program. Also, the entry signs in the city itself. I know it's kind of not a right-of-way, but close enough. I think we need to improve those signs when you enter the city. They're kind of hard to see. They're old, and I think they need to be improved. So Shelley, maybe you can help out on that. And then it's great to see the homeless population trending down. I encourage staff to keep reaching out to other partners that are helping provide homeless with services. And finally, the community development satisfaction. I'm glad to see that we are developing a survey for improving the permit process. I think it needs to be improved, and so I'm really hopeful that we're developing something that will help in that process. Once again, great work to all of you and all your team members, and appreciate the reaching out to us early on in the process.
Councilmember Arredondo Savage.
Thank you, Mayor. Just really quick, Rosa, Mark, Ken, thank you so much for your work. I mean, I know this is not easy to do, and I know some of us were a little slow on doing the START tool. I will take full responsibility for that. So I appreciate your patience. Just a couple things I want to comment on and think about it. And I don't disagree about the pavement quality index, but I do think if we get some information back, we have to talk about the maintenance piece. I think, Rosa, you brought up a really good point. Thank you to Isaac for pointing that out, because what's the point of us investing in our streets if we're not going to maintain them? I think that we've seen a really great increase of participation in our parks because of the dollars that we've actually put into the parks and the money that we're using to maintain them. So if we're not going to maintain things that we're investing in, what's the point of investing in it? So I think those two, if we have that conversation, really need to come together. I would also say, there was another point you brought up that I thought was really, to me, really key, and it made me think a little bit more. It's not just about money. We always talk about our budget and how we do things, but really it's not always about money. I think it's a lot about collaboration, about working together, about the strategies, really identifying what the problem is, and maybe doing things differently, because the way we've been doing isn't the best impact, and throwing money at it isn't going to help if it's the strategy that we have isn't the most impactful. So if there are things that we're going to have information on, whether it's the PQI, whether it's the homeless, whether, you know, it may be the right-of-ways, I think they've kind of mentioned it a little bit, is let's talk about what the strategy is now and what we can change to make it better. Because maybe there is some resources that need to be allocated, but maybe it's just more collaboration, or maybe it's just the way we do things. I will actually say, and I don't say this very often, I was at Valley Metro meeting today at lunch, and one of the things they brought forward was the individuals that were participating in Enomax, and they brought their, I think they called them business projects. So these individuals that participate in Enomax, which are employees, and they go and they collaborate with different other organizations across the country, and they identify an internal problem. And what they do is they collaborate with each other and they find a solution. And it was really amazing. One of the biggest problems that we were having was that at a lot of the rail stops, they were really dirty, and we continue to get really bad feedback from our surveys about how the users didn't feel they were very clean. So one of the projects from last year was about changing the system and the way they clean and doing more power washing at night. And the survey results have skyrocketed because of that change and the resources that were allocated to it. So it was really two things. It wasn't just the money, but it was actually the way we were doing things and being open to doing things a little bit different. So I 100% would say, hey, I think we have the most creative people in this organization that do really remarkable things. And I would just say, I challenge you. I challenge you to look at the strategies that we're utilizing and the things that we're doing and see if we can do it better. Or if there's something that's really working, well then, let's do that better, let's do it more. So I would definitely want to see some information, a little bit more deeper dive on strategies. And then lastly, I would say, let's look at those cross-cutting themes too. Because I was a little disappointed, and I got to take some responsibility for this too, as we put together a working group with the mayor and Councilmember Adams about mental health. And I think mental health is one of those things that's very important and has probably touched all of us in one way or the other. But it's not only important to our city, to our state, but really across the country, and we continue to hear about it. And we talk about substance abuse, we talk about homelessness, we talk about all these things, suicide prevention. To me, mental health is the overarching theme that we really need to talk about. So I would ask and implore my council to really think about, and again, I will take some responsibility, as we haven't had an opportunity to get that working group to the level that it needs to be. And I know it will. We've got a lot of really great key people on that working group, but I think this is one of the things that we need to think about, is those overarching themes and how they impact each other. So with that, again, I just want to say thank you to this really incredible organization and the great people that we have here. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Cubey.
First of all, well said, Councilmember Erdonda Savage. You've given us a lot to think about. I have a couple just remarks and then some questions, but one is, I made a mistake. And I'll full transparency, I'm Councilmember 5. I'm CM5. But I put 20 points towards 419, the city carbon neutrality goal. I meant to put it towards 4.18, the carbon community goal, so I don't know whether that could be reflected in the next time we come back looking at this issue. And the community carbon goal is part of our CAP, our climate action plan, which was adopted just last month, so wanted to make sure I could switch that. Is that okay? And I did have a question actually about that, thinking about the Climate Action Plan and also our Urban Forestry Master Plan. The Urban Forestry Master Plan is number 8 on this list, and I know we stopped at 7 doing the deeper dives, but some of these action plans, it's not just the unanimous votes, but it's also the incredible public engagement that's taken place. I think it was 2.5 years for the urban shade, and the canopy goal. That was a 2.5-year process with Bonnie Richardson. She's just been awarded a big regional prize for it. And then the Climate Action Plan was a similar, about less than 2 years, and we're already into 2.0. So I don't know how that gets weighed when we're looking at priorities for our budget, if we've unanimously adopted a citizen-engaged initiative like that. Just a thing to think about. And I also wanted to ask about our community needs assessment. We get the community satisfaction survey, and the community needs assessment kind of lags by a few months, right? When are we going to receive that? Is that coming in?
The community from Human Services?
Right, from TCC?
It's February, March.
Okay.
They're not scheduled to do another community assessment until next, I guess for the agency project.
Okay. Yeah, because when you look at what concerns our residents most, I mean, when I knock on doors, I hear pavement quality, but I also hear affordable housing, but that's not an issue or question that came in the community satisfaction survey. That usually comes through the community needs assessment. And so I'm wondering how we incorporate those kind of larger human service needs that aren't necessarily reflected in the community satisfaction survey, because they should have impact on the budget as well.
So there was a community needs assessment that was completed 3 years ago. So February. So next year we'll be working at working into another community needs assessment. So I don't know if you're talking about that community needs assessment or the surveys that happen around the agency review process.
I meant the larger one. It just seems like that our community satisfaction survey may leave out some of those bigger issues, because what I hear continually is affordable housing, but from our from all of this, we're not necessarily weighting it in that same way.
So next year we'll have the larger community needs assessment done again. But right now we have the one that we completed 3 years ago.
Okay.
And that's available online. On the
Okay,
web.
thank you. That's a good answer. And I understand that it goes back to our departments. They receive unanimous vote on an action plan for climate action plan and tree and shade, and then they'll go back and they'll figure out how they want to meet those. So I understand there's an internal drive, but I just wanted to make us aware that we do go through this enormous public engagement process. I know with the climate action plan, I think I went to a dozen meetings, and almost every single meeting the point was made, but how does this, you can vote this and you can aspire to this, but are we really going to act on it? How does this get implemented? How does this get reflected in our budget? And that's a really important consideration for the hundreds of people that attended those meetings. So I'd like to see that reflected in our budget, of course. And then the tree and shade goal, I know it was number 8, and we only went through 7 of them today in the interest of time, but the tree and shade goal, we started at 13%, and now we're at 13%. So I think that unless there's a deeper dive that I haven't seen, we haven't really made progress on that goal.
Councilmember, we didn't bring that information, and we can look it up and let you know. In your tool, you were able to click on that and go and see where it was. So I know it was at number 8, and the reason it was at number 8 is because only 3 people gave it scores. So which I just want to reiterate, doesn't mean that people think it isn't important. It might mean that they think we're moving sufficiently towards that goal. And it surprises me what you're saying, that because we've had some pretty significant efforts to get trees planted. And I don't
No, that's
know.
why I was surprised. I mean, we have attrition, but I was surprised to see that it was at 13.
The focus for the funding had been to hire the forester, and I think they'll have more CIP requests as now that they have Richard on board since August. So I think they'll be working on more of that.
Yeah,
Great.
Craig,
It's good to hear.
Craig just stepped up to the plate.
Oh, there he is.
I'd be happy to answer
partially answer this one. When it went to a percentage amount versus a trees per acre, we're working with the GIS team to figure out the best way to actually capture that on an ongoing basis, whether it's every year, every 5 years, every 10 years. It's a different measurement rather than just trees per acre, which is a number that is static compared to how many trees you actually have. But now we're actually trying to figure out the best route and whether that happens on an annual basis or every 5
I
years.
mean, we know we planted a lot more trees, so that's-
We did, and this CIP will also include making up for trees that we've lost through attrition. So we want to make sure that we're making up for it, as well as planting those new trees. But the percentage is a bigger challenge in actually trying to figure out what that percentage is through LiDAR data, or if we go through different means. So it's a bit more complicated than just straight trees per acre. My guess at this point is that we haven't been able to update it because we haven't taken a secondary reading off of that at this point.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. And I realize it's a more complicated process to measure the data. Thanks so much.
But it's a true percentage when we get that, which is great. You'll know exactly what the coverage is and the impacts of that.
And then on slide 7, could we go back to that one relating to congestion? I just want to suggest that another strategy that I think we are talking about, or staff might be talking about, is traffic demand management. It was brought up in the context of the Urban Core Master Plan, but I think there's a discussion about perhaps applying it across the city, and that is certainly a strategy that helps with lessen traffic and congestion and instill other behaviors. So just wanted to mention that as a strategy. And then about the pavement, and I know that the community satisfaction survey, that was done in July, and so if we put $3 million extra from a general fund, it didn't come from transportation funds, but we put $3 million more in to advance that goal by a year, and I don't think we would necessarily see the perceived results. We see, like you mentioned, Ken, thank you for making that point, we see an increase in actual pavement quality, but we may not see a perceptive increase from our residents because it was actually, it was done in July before that additional $3 million was apportioned. So I think that's a point to make as well. And with that, that's the end of my commentary. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you.
I will say, just to respond to one thing you said, Councilmember, I didn't want to interrupt you, that the change from 419 to 418 really is for tonight's conversation. I hope you all can come to some consensus on some things that you say we really want to see. And to Councilmember Arredondo Savage's point, if you say tonight, we're really interested in pavement quality and improving that, I love the fact that you're not saying put another $3 million in pavement quality. You're saying, hey, staff, come back to us with better strategies to improve pavement quality. And that's the same for all of them. We really should be looking at strategies. And just so you know, this is very exciting for me, by the way. When we bring in our Chris Tatum and brings in the community results, we don't just look and say people aren't feeling safe in the parks. Let's put some money towards that and guess at what it is. We dive deeper into it and we say, who's not happy? Who's not feeling safe in the park? What age group? Rosa and her group dig into that data and say, what age group isn't happy? In what location do the people live that are saying they're not happy, so that we can create focus groups, so that we can focus our efforts and our funding on those areas to get the best results. So Councilmember Arredondo Savage, you're exactly correct. It isn't always about spending money, it's about figuring out how to solve the problem. And I think the staff that you see here tonight behind me are really good at that.
Yep, I agree. Vice Mayor?
Yeah, then I just wanted to remark about affordable housing. I mentioned it before because the measures we have don't necessarily correlate to maybe what our goals are. We talk about where our balance is, and it's sort of a large-scale picture, and then, but to create affordable housing is very micro-scale. And so I'm wondering whether with our affordable housing trust fund, we have that as a strategy that we're going to increase that, and we've been talking about it for about a year that we're going to be increasing that. So how can I convey or get the consensus of the council tonight that we do want to see, I hope we do want to see, I know it's one of our highest priorities, that we want to see an influx of funds into our affordable housing trust fund?
With all due respect, that's kind of a solution to a problem. If you said to us tonight, we want to get better strategies for solving affordable housing, then we could come back to you with those strategies, which could include funding an affordable housing trust fund, or could include any other strategies which the council could recommend. I don't think we really want to delve into tonight to what are the solutions. We want you to tell us what are those outcomes that we're not achieving at a fast enough rate.
Well,
And
true,
if-
but
if
part of.
affordable housing is one of those, then we're more than happy to look at that.
But again, we went through a very exhaustive project with our affordable housing strategy, and we adopted the most aggressive of goals and that affordable housing strategy. But then we look at the measurements that come up here, and affordable housing is pretty low on the list. And so it's just it's just a sort of a disconnect between these very publicly engaged and staff-engaged processes to develop the affordable housing strategy, and then we say what we need to do is this, but then we don't necessarily see that reflected in the budget. How do we get those decisions reflected in the budget?
Yeah, we are more than happy to listen to a consensus of the council. If that's the consensus, we'll look at that strategy, for sure.
Councilmember Erdano Savage and then Councilmember Adams.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Actually, I don't think I would quite go there to this specific strategy, because if that's what we're going to talk about, I would go to acquisition. I would think that would be the best strategy, so that it's something that we would buy, we would purchase, we would control. However, I would challenge our staff, they're the professionals, to really evaluate what we're doing and then come back with ways that we can, and maybe one of the strategies is through the Housing Trust Fund, I don't really know, or maybe it is through acquisitions. But I would like to see what's having the best results, what's impacting the most people, and then have that discussion to open it up from there. Vice Mayor, if you're okay with that. The one thing, though, I would ask my council colleagues, too, is if you don't mind, to really see if we can get the staff to come back and look at like that cross-cutting thing that we talked about with mental health, because I think mental health is going to be so important we talked about suicide prevention, dementia-friendly, substance abuse, homelessness. There's so many things that are impacted by that, and I would like to really see what we're doing to be able to address that and just make sure that we have that on the front burner, because it impacts so many things. That would be really great if everybody's okay with that.
Vice Mayor Katie.
Councilmember Ardonna Savage, what you said before, I agree with, but a clarification, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund can be used for acquisition of housing, can it not?
Well, that's what I think, that we would get that information
Yeah,
back. I think they
right.
would tell us the best way to do it. So whether it's
Right.
through the CDBG, through the Housing Trust Fund, I would expect them to bring back that information.
Right, okay.
Councilmember Adams.
Yes, I'm all for affordable housing. I think we need to look at the different strategies so that we have, I'm agreeing with Councilmember Arredondo Savage on this point. And also, Rosa, you had brought up some different statistics as far as where we are with affordable housing and other things that you mentioned. And I thought that it was my understanding that Tempe was ahead of where most cities are on affordable housing, but perhaps I'm... The inventory? Yeah, the inventory. It was early on in your presentation.
While she's looking for data, I can tell you that when we did the study and we worked with, like the Bloomberg group came in and helped us out, and we looked with some Smart Cities folks, and what they said was, if you look at the raw figures of the percentage of workforce, affordable, market housing that you have, compared to other cities, you actually have a lot. Not surprising, in a large university town, you would have a lot of for rent housing and things like that that are considered affordable. So for the size of our city, they told us if you can maintain those ratios, you're doing really well. I appreciate the fact that the city council isn't going to wait until those ratios slip, and you're talking about addressing affordable housing now so that those ratios don't slip, because we look at the developments that are coming in and we can clearly see that they're not going to contribute to our affordable housing or workforce housing inventories. So trying to head that off at the pass is probably a good strategy. But I do think, to your point, what they said was our ratios aren't bad compared to other cities our size. The ratios in those categories.
Okay, Ms. Sinchowski, do you want to respond?
That's exactly correct. I'll leave it at that.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right.
Nicely stated, Ken.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Councilmember Keating, then Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say I'm all for exploring additional affordable housing strategies. Anything we can do in our upcoming budget to reflect that the council has set this as a big priority for us would be very helpful moving forward. I also want to just chime in on Councilmember Arredondo Savage's desire for a deeper look at what we can do for mental health in the city of Tempe. It is obviously a big problem not only in Tempe but nationwide, and some of the larger issues that we see in our community, such as homelessness, kind of revolve around that. So anything we can do to move that needle in the city of Tempe as well, I think would be very helpful. Thank you.
Councilman Navarro.
Thanks, Mayor. Really just echoing Councilmember Keating's points. Recently out on a conference, and I know Naomi and Paul are out there too, and talking about mental health and what is going on, not just in our cities, but everybody's cities. We are going to have a deeper conversation because this is really strategic on how we present this in our city. I think it's going to be a template if we do it right for the other cities to hopefully follow. But I think it's going to really address how we do our affordable housing, how we do our transition housing, a whole bunch of other things that go along with it, because the root is figuring out that puzzle, and I think it even starts at the young age when we talk about pre-K and all this other good stuff. So I'm looking forward to that conversation, but I think that we do need to really tune into the piece of mental health.
I just want to echo the mental health as I was on that working group, but also with mental health, also dementia plays a role in that, and a caregiver with mental health. So that could be tied there. Councilmember Cubey, or Vice Mayor Cubey.
So I just want to circle back about the climate action plan and mention again that was unanimously passed, and thank you, Council, for that. But at that time, we discussed that we were going to look at, and in the budget discussion, about staff coming back with recommendations on how that plan could be implemented. And so I'm hoping for council consensus tonight that we can ask staff to strategize and come back with recommendations in the budget for actually implementing that plan.
So circling back, is there consensus from the council on, I'm going to take what I've written down, some of the priorities, obviously the quality of pavement, that's one. We're looking at mental health. Are we looking at the trees?
Mm-hmm.
But the trees, the shade canopy? And the right-of-ways? As a priority. Affordable housing strategies that we can, per Councilman Arredondo Savage, talking about, what outside, we challenge all of our staff to come up. It may not be money as was stated, but it could be some other initiatives and ways how we do it and to be more efficient. And then, what am I leaving out? Climate action plan? Yep. Leave anything else? Solving all the world's problems? Oh, yeah, oh, yes, the traffic mitigation. Slide 7, let me go back.
Traffic congestion.
The congestion where the,
Yeah.
it says,
And Mayor, you asked.
and that's
us-
part, I asked that to come back at a work
you
study
asked
session.
that to come back and.
If we could get consensus on that?
Yeah, my response would be, what Rosa said was, she's working with Shelley Seiler's group to develop what
Okay.
are even measurement, what is the ideal condition for this? We don't know exactly how we're gonna measure that yet. So she'll come back to you with that anyway, to say, you need to approve our performance measure in that area. So we will definitely come back.
Right, with optimizing signal timing on arterial streets, the corridors, improvement in infrastructure.
And traffic demand management?
The things that you two just mentioned are probably going to be strategies to
Right.
get there. But
Right.
we still have the question of what is the ideal condition? Is it measurement of how you get from point A to point B in a certain number of time? Is it a measurement of how long it takes to traverse the city on any given day? That measurement is important. How are we going to measure whether or not we reach the ideal condition at some point? So that's quite a struggle, but we will come back to you with that so that you can approve. You can see this is under development. We will come back to you so that you can approve what is a good measurement of success in that area.
So basically, before I go to Councilmember Adams, if you look at our chart, it's the 7 things that we talked about, and then add mental health with some potential dimension.
Climate action
It's on
plan.
there.
And can we, Mr. Mayor, could we also add new signage coming into the city as part of the right-of-ways improvements?
You want to
Entryway.
consider that, you want to
Yes.
consider that in the right-of-way?
In the right-of-way
In the right-
topic,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Councilman Navarro?
Okay, thank you.
I know this is probably always going to be addressed, but the fact that we have some core values that we have to make sure that we're staying on top of too, and I think those will always be there. But with our public works and our public safety and the growth of our city and the safety, I know it's kind of in that thing, but I don't want to. It needs to be said that I don't want to lose focus that we're not looking at those things. We always need to look at those things and make sure that we're ahead of the 8 ball, so to speak.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next item, Parks and Recreation Master Plan.
there. All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. Keith Burke, Community Services Director, and with me tonight is Craig Hayden, Community Services Deputy Director of Parks and Recreation, and Kelly Rafferty, Community Services Recreation Manager. Tonight is the first of 3 public reviews for our Parks and Recreation master planning process, which will include continuous public outreach updates, parks and boards, commissions, presentations, before the next work study session that we present at. The last Parks and Recreation master plan process was completed almost 20 years ago. In about 2001. There have been plenty of changes since then with additional new parks, facilities, and programs such as Escare Park, North Tempe Multi-Gen Center, adaptive recreation activities, and the Pickleball Court Complex, just to name a few. We have been very fortunate to continue on with the implementation of the 5-year park CIP improvement process, which elevates the quality of life in our community. And this new comprehensive master plan will guide us over the next 10 years. And Kelly and Craig will go into more detail in the first phase of the process.
Thank you, Keith. So I want to talk about what we're going to cover tonight. We're going to talk about the what and why, who's involved, and what the process is. Craig's also going to discuss the outreach we've done with focus groups and the survey, and also some of the creative things we've done related to that. And he'll also cover where we're headed next. All 5 council priorities are important to this master planning process. Specifically, priority 3, quality of life, includes 2 key performance measures, 3.16, which is the physical spaces we manage, and 3.17, which is the programs we offer. So what is a Parks and Recreation Master Plan? It's a comprehensive 10-year planning document. It covers parks, facilities, sports fields, and programming. It evaluates and recommends. It shapes the delivery of services, provides guidance and policy direction, and identifies short-term strategies to achieve long-term success. So as far as some key questions of who was involved, we have a project team made up of city staff. We also have a technical advisory committee, which includes additional city staff with expertise in different areas, along with 2 members of the Parks, Recreation, Golf, and W Butte Cemetery Board. And our consultant on the project is Leslie Dornfield, who's with Planet, and she has additional subs underneath her. And really the main focus and the important aspects as we move forward with input is from council, the boards and commissions, and residents. So as far as the planning process, we've really looked at this in 5 steps. In the upper right corner, you can see those 5. Really, it ends with practical implementation. So that's what we're working towards. And also in the bottom right chart, there's a lot of overlap in this whole process. And Craig's going to talk through the timeline and the next steps.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. Thank you, Keith and Kelly. We're now going to spend the majority of our time for this presentation talking about outreach that we've been able to perform today, understanding that this is a 3-step process. We want to really report back on what we've heard. We want to come back in the spring and say this is not only what we've heard, but we want to look at benchmarking and comparing ourselves to other municipalities and park systems that are throughout the nation. And then we want to come back a 3rd time in the summer and fall and say, this is what the draft plan is. We'd like to take your input. So we want to be very, not just with Mayor and Council, be very forward and above board throughout the whole process, but also with the public as well, and then boards and commissions, understanding that input really is a key for this critical planning effort moving forward. And the 2 key pieces for the public outreach to date is focus groups and surveys. So we're going to start with the focus groups, which really zero in on the qualitative information. We have roundtable discussions, usually smaller groups, where we want to have a nice open dialogue. And we have an opportunity there to bring in different folks, residents, users, service providers, partners, staff, and really we had an opportunity earlier in the summer to have over 2 days. We had 12 different focus groups. We had 63 folks sign in, but we believe that there are more that are actually part of this. And we really found that there were some key themes that we found really recurred throughout this focus group process. And we found that there's opportunities for us to improve our communication, to provide more simple processes for reservations, cancellations, those sorts of things. A way, much like the feeling of safety in parks, what can we do to increase safety? Additional opportunities when we are providing opportunities, whether they're programs or also within facilities and within our parks, what can we do to make sure that they're actually multi-use facilities as well, to where we're sharing some spaces? a key piece on adding shade. When we get into some of the barriers to park use, we're going to see that one's going to score extremely high, and it's already been talked about tonight with urban forest. But then also, that has been discussed previously with PQI, we want to focus not just on making the improvements, but on what can we do to make sure that we're providing a key recreational opportunity by maintaining what is actually out within the fields and within the programs that we offer as well. And then we're going to spend the next dozen or so slides talking through our public survey that we've been able to perform. The goal, as opposed to the focus groups that was looking at qualitative information, we really want to focus on the numbers, the quantitative information for a public survey. And we had an opportunity really to set up a 15 core question survey with some follow-up questions based on how respondents answered those initial questions, really to dive in. But there was some additional demographic information that we asked for as well. We really wanted to know where people lived that were responding to the survey, if they worked in Tempe, and obviously how they did so. But we looked at residents, but we also looked at opening up wider than just Tempe residents to all park facility and program users that utilize our parks and recreational facilities. This was a really key fork in the road early on, where we decided not to go down the statistically valid survey route, which would have really limited our respondents to a specific number, really called at random. When we really opened this up to a complete opt-in survey for anybody who wanted to fill out the survey, and they can answer as many or as little questions as they wanted. We kept it open for a significant period of time of 6 weeks. And then through neighborhood services and our PIO team, and then our various staff at different municipal complexes and our recreation centers, we actually went through various outreach methods and efforts throughout the process. And as we talked through some of the demographic information that's within the survey, we were able to provide follow-up opportunities, not just kicking off the survey at an existing event with the pickleball opening back in the middle of May, but also looked at other park opening opportunities. We really wanted to pick up some synergy from things that are already happening rather than just creating new opportunities. But when we realized certain areas were underrepresented, we want to make sure that we could actually target those areas to see what we could do. Understanding we weren't providing a statistically valid survey, but we wanted to be as well-rounded as possible, so we actually had goals for each area within the city and different demographics as well. We offered, as you can see on the right-hand side, that we offered the survey in Spanish and in English as well, so we gave multiple opportunities language-wise. Just from a flow perspective, we wanted to start the survey with some just general information, but we also really wanted to make sure that we flowed in a very logical way. We wanted to know how folks and where they recreated, what were some additional opportunities that we weren't offering now that would bring people within our parks and recreational facilities. What is keeping people from recreating fully within our city? That's a key question that we wanted to make sure during this listen and learn part of the process that we want to understand. And then we also wanted to understand and provide some opportunities for our respondents to provide information and answer questions as it related to funding, a couple key questions at the end. So we're going to start by reporting back on just a few of the really high-level pieces from the survey. The full survey report and the focus group report is within the packet materials. But as you can see, we had a significant turnout from our survey, 1,857 survey responses. We're extremely proud of that, and that really says a lot from what our residents and our park users, how engaged they are within this process. So kudos to the neighborhood services, to Melissa Quillard and her team as well, but also teams at different areas in multiple capacities, really getting that number up. That is a significant and really blew us out of and our consultant really out of the water that we got that much response. 77% of those who responded to the survey live within Tempe, and I've highlighted in left, it kind of sticks out odd that I would list a total of 100%, showing that we can count more than that. We're going to be referring on the bottom left-hand side to that lime green for the Tempe residents, the light blue for the non-Tempe residents, and then the dark blue total on a couple of the other slides. So I'm highlighting it here just to show that we're going to show some differences between how residents and non-Tempe residents have answered a couple of the questions later on very specifically.
Craig, I have one question. Councilmember O'Donnell Savage.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just really quick, Craig, in regards to those, I mean, that's a huge number. That's amazing. So thank you to your work and the PIOs for getting that done. Did you have an opportunity to check the ages of the respondents? I'm just wondering if there was youth, high school kids, elementary school kids, middle school kids.
Yeah, that was part of,
like youth.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Donnell Savage. That was part of the demographic information that people could submit. If they chose not to, they didn't have to. but within the full packet materials, people did select where their ages were within that. And we had goals within it as well so that we could actually do some targeted outreach to seniors if they were underrepresented as well. So that was something that we did look for very specifically, still keeping it fully opt-in so where we could really drive the numbers from the quantitative side of it as well.
Thank you.
Yep. And then, though it was not a statistically valid survey, we had goals for each zip code that was really broken up by population breakout by zip code within the city. So 37% of the city's population is within 85281, so we had that as a goal. Through targeted outreach, we were able to then, we are at one point under, 20% underrepresented within 85281. By actually providing some targeted outreach to 85281, we're actually to bring it up just now that it was underrepresented by 9%. So we felt that that was much more in line with where we wanted to get. We still wanted to make sure that we had goals as it related to that demographic within city residents. And then as you can see on the far right-hand side that the city of Phoenix did have far and away the highest non-Tempe resident response rate as well. And then kind of a cool report back, understanding just how incredible, it's great at park openings, Mayor, when you state that, that neighborhoods are really the cornerstone of our community and that parks are that central piece. Expanding it to parks and recreation, both the physical spaces and the programs, that 2 out of 3 people have met new people within parks and facilities really shows the important part that parks and recreation plays within the city. So something we wanted to highlight. It doesn't fit cleanly within any category, but it was a really cool question that we had an opportunity to ask that really highlights just the community building nature of what parks and recreation has the potential to do, that highlights the importance of this within the plan. So really a cool piece to highlight. Now moving on to those Tempe residents, non-residents, and then the total splits, we're going to highlight what folks thought of our parks and recreational system. As you can see that 80%, 4 and 5, when you look at the total number of the dark blue, combining them, 21 and the 59, believe that our system is either excellent or good. That is slightly above the recent survey results, but right in line with what those were. And then it seems strange on the surface that non-residents actually rank us higher in that area for the quality at 84% in those two, but when you realize that they're actually coming to Tempe to use our services and our programs and our facilities, they're certainly going to rank it higher. But the 78% is right in line with their community survey, really reinforcing those numbers. And how often folks are recreating, we're going to make the distinction between resident and non-resident as well, but if we look at the total, we see that more than 50% are utilizing our parks and recreational facilities and programs at least once per week. That's a really high rate within that specifically, but then within Tempe residents, they're more likely to utilize our spaces more often, whether it's more than once a week or once a week, versus our non-residents are much more likely to come within parks and recreational facilities or programs less often, whether it's several times a year or once a year on that one. How people recreate, we asked whether folks recreated regularly, occasionally, or never. We're reporting back on this slide that use of trails, which can certainly expand beyond just trails within parks. So this has an impact on the transportation network as well, that we see that 85% of the people that respond to this survey really highlight that they use some sort of path, local path or trail. This could be the Western Canal Path as much as it could be utilizing the paths within Kiwanis Park. What we would consider passive park use, relaxing or playing on the grass, scored a high second. And then third, the more traditional park uses of ramadas, playground, and picnic areas scored high third at 81%. And then attending events, water activities also scored relatively highly as well, whether it's regularly or occasional on use. Now the fun question of what could we provide that folks don't believe that we have enough of. And we asked, this is certainly a lot of information on one slide, but we asked out of 23 different categories for amenities, what did respondents say we need more of, or that we actually have enough of currently? And you can see that unpaved trails and paved trails scored highest 1 and 2, which really responds back to how folks are utilizing the system. Number 3 is splash play elements, whether it's splash pads or splash playgrounds. And then fourth on the list, almost 1 out of every 3 people is stating that they utilize, that they would like to see more dog parks within the city, fitness center, swimming pools, moves on further down. And then you get really, at the bottom of the list, really very specific sports. So if we look at combining some of the sports use, it actually ticks up a little bit within the multi-use fields. But a very telling slide of what we're looking for, opportunities that our residents are actually looking for within their parks and recreational system. And then just as a side note to this, within public outreach that we do to specific neighborhoods, we're actually asking this question as well. What amenity would folks like to see the most within their system, within their neighborhood park, or what would they not like to see within that area as well? So we want to make sure that we're gathering this on a system-wide basis, but also that we're driving home within that specific neighborhood as well when we have those opportunities and we're already going out. So this is a very telling slide of opportunities that we have to meet needs with physical infrastructure. And second to this is, what are those things that we have that you don't necessarily go to the park for, but when you're there that you really miss when they're not actually there? Shade structures, or shade, is the thing and a support amenity that is really missing the most. 65% of folks actually said that we could do with more shade structures within parks, whether this is ramadas, over shade, playgrounds, over sitting areas, whatever it be, but just the desire to combat the heat, especially in the summer, and drag out the year and utilize our parks and systems higher. Surprisingly, bathrooms scored relatively highly as well, and this is not just community parks, but neighborhood parks, great opportunities. And then down on the bottom, we've got grills and signage as well, so opportunities that are being met at certainly a higher level than shade and bathrooms and recycling opportunities within our parks. So these are very telling of what we could add within our parks. Certainly shade structures is stuff that is available through the CIP process, but also through neighborhood grants. And then bathrooms certainly are things that we're making sure that the quality is up.
Vice Mayor Cubey.
Can you go to the previous slide? I just have a question about the physical challenge parks. Is that for park horses, or is it for people who have physical challenges?
It would
or
be
both?
like a parkour, yeah.
But not for those who have physical challenges and they want equipment that they can use for ADA?
No, and that's a great question, and we're incorporating through inclusive playground design specifically. We've really focused on finding opportunities to provide more equipment that meets greater needs based on challenge levels that are associated. So that certainly is something that we could have provided as a question, but this one very specifically looks at those really engaging courses where folks get a chance to jump and run. And,
right. Okay.
And hang on to
Councilmember
some
Adams.
elements.
The new park improvements that we've been going to, like for Earhart, for example, we do have some ADA equipment, do we not, in the new remodeled parks?
We do. We have access for full rubber. We also have a varying level. We have an inclusive playground guide that helps guide our design of parks, where we have elements at various challenge levels based on the abilities of those who utilize it. And we have, based on the size that we have of the playground, we need to make sure that we're meeting certain element in goals for those different challenge levels. So there certainly are, whether it's ramps or utilizing different equipment that meets those different challenge levels.
Okay, thank you.
All right, moving on. An important question is, what's keeping people from recreating? Very similar to what they would like to see more of from a support amenity. Shade is a really key piece that's missing within our parks, but also lack of restrooms, again, very similar to that last slide on support amenities. But also we see that there's concerns over cleanliness and safety and lack of lighting. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't move on without highlighting at the bottom that 1 in 4 actually stating that nothing's limiting use within their park. So we know that we have opportunities, but we also know that some folks feel fully free and able to utilize our parks and facilities as they sit from a physical perspective, not the programming side. Program is on the flip side from the barriers. We see that when programs are being offered, the types, the what programs are being offered are 1 and 2, followed by cost, and then location where they're being offered. But then the really large number at the bottom, that 42% of folks are actually stating that there's nothing limiting their access to programs within the Parks and Recreational system. And then 8% of respondents actually aren't participating in programs currently.
Councilmember Adano Savage.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. Good information. I'm just kind of wondering, going back to what Ken Jones said earlier, are you able to break this information down as to where we may be having some challenges specifically?
Absolutely. And when we get the full information, the raw data from our consultant, that's exactly what we're going to do. Our survey report doesn't include any of the open-ended answers as well that we asked. So this was just stuff that we could purely provide numbers, but there is a lot of information beyond there. All right, so we asked a couple funding questions while we had the opportunity, really looking at respondents highlighting high, moderate, and low priorities for maintaining existing infrastructure and programs. Those 2 scored the highest, as you can see in the dark blue, for the first 2 lines, even second with some moderate priority on there. But there is a desire, a moderate desire, to actually add new programs and new facilities within parks. And then on the far right-hand side, between 12 and 20% chose not to answer this question and didn't have an opinion. And second funding question, we asked if we're to look for other sources of funding to provide amenities and programs within the city, much like what we're doing with Rio Salado with the current public-private partnership request for information. 74% of people actually were completely in favor of developing partnerships with private entities to provide those services or funds for improvements. So these are the creative ways that we can actually provide some improvements. Offer facility naming rights and sponsorship scored extremely highly as well. And then lowest on the lists, and this is residents only within Tempe that we asked, that we're reporting on this answer here specifically or in this question. The lowest on the list was support with 28% of those who chose to answer were increasing fees for programs and facilities as well. So a very telling slide, depending on what we want to move to next. And as we mentioned, or as I didn't mention, but third, if we were to create a tax, it would split about 50-50 on those residents who actually chose to answer this one. So we wanted to make sure while we had the opportunity that we asked folks different funding strategy questions. So as Kelly mentioned earlier, our next steps really is taking this large chart and realizing there's a lot of overlap within the different systems. Our consultants currently doing benchmarking, behind the scenes work. We're gathering our technical advisory committee back together before the holidays and make sure that we're getting together so that we can plan out what early in 2020 looks like, because we want to make sure that we can come back and state not only this is what we've heard that we've presented here tonight, but we're going to have two public meetings in early January 2020. Boards and commissions starting with the Parks Board on the 20th of, or excuse me, on the 18th of this month, and then we'll do boards and commissions in January as well. But we anticipate coming back and saying this is what we've learned from other communities, how we stack up, but also this is where we're generally headed with the plan before we actually come back in the summer or fall with a draft plan from there. So a lot of overlap. We certainly aren't pausing any work that we're doing in preparation for this presentation. Leslie Dornfield from Planet has been a great consultant to work with, and her consultant team, and we look forward to really continuing this effort and then coming back with these other two touches before hopefully the final adoption of the plan at the end of 2020.
Right. Keith, I got to tell you, Keith, Kelly, Craig, all the park openings we've been to, it's amazing to see the turnout of the people and their faces. It really does define a community. I can't thank you enough. The information you provide is really good information that you collected, and I must say it appears that most of the parks in our city, our residents are very satisfied with the programs and amenities, but we're always looking to improve. We're not going to just be satisfied with 80%, but you should be really, really proud of those results. I think it speaks volumes of the work that you all do and the vision that the council has, and the you know, providing the necessary resources that's in our CIP for the next 5 years. The $60 million that we're putting into our parks is something that's really, really cool. I got to tell you, the question about making friends, I got chills when you said that, and I saw the survey. That really does define, as a kid growing up here, and I could tell you, everything happened at my neighborhood park when I was a kid. Everything, from all my sporting events to my friends. We'd call each other, we'd meet down there, wait for the irrigation to happen. Obviously, we had 2 days to do that. The third day kind of gets a little smelly, maybe the fourth day, by the fourth day. But I would tell you, it really, really brings back a lot of memories, and going to the park openings and seeing the faces and the families just coming up, not only to me, to Councilmember Adams and all the other council members, Joel and Robin and Lauren, and Randy and Arlene. I named everybody, Randy. I mean, it really is important to see the look on their faces and saying thank you. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be continuing to invest in the quality of life of our neighborhoods. And I have to, as you mentioned, I really strongly feel that our neighborhoods are the cornerstone of our community, but the cornerstone of our neighborhoods are our parks. We have a park every square mile, and I talk to individuals, they're amazed. I said, well, just open your phone on maps, and you can see the green. Every square mile we have a park. And I like the comment where they want to continue to maintain and improve our park. So thank you. I do have one question, but what's an unpaved trail, if that's the top one? Like, what constitutes that?
Yeah, so
other than what I know in Papago Park.
Yeah, so from a neighborhood perspective, Cole and Rotary parks that were renovated back in the mid-2000s have a stabilized decomposed granite trail.
That's
so
what I thought. That's
very
what
similar
I kind of thought it was. Okay. Interesting. Councilmember Adams.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Really great how you all did the survey. You went outside the box, and I really like that. And the number of people that you had respond to the survey is really impressive. I like the also good work on getting people to respond from various zip codes. However, I was disappointed that 85284 did not meet the average as far as the number of responses. So
Don't you live down there?
I do. I think it was like you received 9% and the average would be 16%, so we were lower. Unless I misunderstood.
It was the exact opposite.
It's the exact
It was
opposite. Okay,
overrepresented by a bit.
overrepresented. All right, that's much better. All right, thank you. 8-1 was? Ms. Kupi has informed me that 8-1 was very representative, so I guess we can work on that for next year.
We did, and that's where, thank you, Councilman Rounds, and that's where the targeted outreach, understanding that it was underrepresented even more at one point within the survey, and through follow-up emails, outreach of staff, we were able to bridge that gap a bit more, and really thankful for that. It wasn't quite the number that we were hoping for, but it was much more in line with where we were initially.
Okay, and you're going to remember what you did to reach out to the 8-1s too, so we can improve that next year or whenever we do the next survey?
Absolutely.
Okay, good. And then the trails, I'm looking forward to the trails being improved because of Papago Park and our outreach efforts at Papago Park. So that's very exciting. And then I really would like us to pay attention to the dog parks. People, a third of the population said dog parks are very important. And in fact, not even a third of people, a third of the population said dog parks were important, but not everyone has even a dog. So I just think that's really something to look forward to, and I'd like to see more dog parks. That's a great way to meet your neighbors, let your dogs play, and kind of what Mark was talking about with getting to know people at parks. The dog parks really do work. And there was a final thing also, Earhart Park. I went to that opening with Mayor Mitchell, and we really noticed about the generations, the multi-generations, being able to interact with one another, because Friendship Village is right there. And then we had all kinds of kids in the neighborhood and parents, and people were meeting each other for the first time on that day. So you did a great job with that park opening and all the other park openings that you've done. So thanks so much to you and your team, and I appreciate all your help in helping the residents. Thank you.
Councilman Navarro.
Thank you, Mayor. A lot of it's been said. Outstanding job. I think you guys understand it's so important to the community. I mean, the turnout, I think, speaks volumes. One of the goals, along with increasing zip codes and certain zip codes, is beat that number again. Because I really do think you can, because people just do enjoy our parks. It's the bottom line. They want to see them improve. Keep on updating them. Keep on improving and expanding the quality of the playgrounds, quality of the programs that we do. Think outside the box. I know that we talked about, soccer fields and softball fields and a variety of sports that people would love to see here. Where else can we go? The incentive of trying to figure out other funding, love that. This whole thing just shows, in my opinion, how important it is that our parks are to our community. When we talk about things like mental health, this is one of the things that actually helps people, is the value of the quality of the park, the value of open space, the value of trees within those areas. So it's just all the things that we're doing right. One thing I always bring up is when we do park planning and park design, and I know it's up to the residents to improve their area park, is keeping space for that open play. Sometimes I see parks and we just plant trees to plant trees, but are we planting trees in the right areas, like on the borders where people view and watch activity? The activity is in the middle. Obviously, we can't plant a tree in there, but having enough shade so that when we have kids in sports and programs, that they have that quality of visual and comfort and shade and all that good stuff. So design is so key, in my opinion. And I think you guys already know that, but thank you, Keith, everyone, for this whole thing.
Thank you, Councilmember Navarro.
Yep. Anybody else? Thank you. All right. Any future agenda items? Vice Mayor?
I have one, and assuming we have consensus here, but I had a long discussion with Adrian Fontes, who is the Maricopa County Recorder, and I've also discussed with Judy Bauman, our city attorney. There's going to be eventually a requirement to move our election months, where the county won't be supporting the elections if they're held in March, so that'd be considerable cost to the city, and so there's a possibility of moving them to August, which would be terrible, I think, for Tempe, because of the independence and such, being kind of disenfranchised, and there's the opportunity to move to November and March. It would involve a ballot initiative that we would have to refer, so we need to get discussing it so we can possibly be able to have a ballot initiative if we have to in November 2020. So we need to get on the docket to discuss upcoming elections, not the 2020 elections, but the 2022 elections.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Are you talking about a ballot referendum that the council would prefer a charter amendment?
Yes,
Okay.
because it's in the charter when we do have our elections. I think it's, and what we have in the charter now is inaccurate. It says March and April, I believe, right?
It does, correct. We can, as staff, we can bring back a collaborative presentation for you.
Great.
Okay. Anybody else? Seeing none, move on to the next item on our agenda is a call to the audience for committee of the whole items listed under section 4B. Audience members have up to 3 minutes. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address us on any of the items listed on the committee of the whole? Could you please get our attention? Seeing none. Committee of the whole items ready for council direction and update. We don't have any. New items for consideration. We do have one, and I am working with Councilmember Keating and Councilmember Navarro on a prevailing wage discussion, and we'll be looking to have some stakeholders. Let me find it. I know some cities have adopted some policies that required some projects that have a prevailing wage requirement. We're going to look and study this issue, and we'd like to learn more about how this and other cities, what they have done regarding this requirement and what they've done about it. So we're looking to see if it's okay with the council to form a working group. Vice Mayor?
Yes, I'm all for the working group. I highly support it. Just the thing that popped out at me when reading the memo was that it was anticipated that the full exploration of this issue and stakeholder engagement is expected to take 6 months. And considering other cities and other states have prevailing wages, and considering that in 1931, under the Herbert Hoover administration, the federal prevailing wage was established, I don't understand why we're looking at a 6-month process. We obviously need to have, if something is developed, public engagement. That would be, Wednesday and Saturday, and we'd have to have an online forum, but I don't know why we need to put on the agenda that, on the COW, that would be a 6-month process, which seems really slow considering there's a lot of construction going on, and we want to, if we consider this and take 6 months, and by the time it takes effect, it'll end up being, 9 months. So I just wanted to ask about that. I was curious.
Well, just for point of clarity, we have a 90-day check-in, so it may not take the 6 months. It's just to make sure you had it covered. Councilmember Keating?
And I actually met with the stakeholders today on this and told them it would probably be about 6 months, and they were fine with that.
Okay. So is there consensus to form a working group? Okay. Thank you. Next, items in progress. Anybody have any updates on items in progress? Seeing none? Announcements. Mr. City Manager, do you have any announcements?
No announcements, thank you.
I do have a couple. I just want to, first, I want to thank the DTA, Kiwanis Club of Tempe, for the great Fantasy of Lights Parade. It was great. It actually felt even more like Christmas because of the cold weather. So I think that was, I really appreciated that, and all the residents and the sponsors that came out for that. I do want to also congratulate ASU. We got the Territorial Cup. Been here more than a couple years now. That's fantastic. It's exciting. I do want to mention that we did lose a community member We actually lost one today, one a couple days ago, and one today. My thoughts and prayers go out to our own Assistant Fire Chief Tony Butch and his family. And another one is a former council member. Actually went to the service today with former council member Bev Herman. She was also a state legislator, and she was a true champion for those with disabilities. And I know that we're a caring community in what we do with our community members, from Tempe Centers for Rehabilitation to the ARC, you name it, we care, to Best Buddies. I got to tell you, this is something that was really enlightening to learn even more of what Bev Herman did in this arena. So thoughts and prayers go out to the Herman family. I want to wish everyone a happy holiday season, and we'll see you next week. We're adjourned.